recently gone back to school to become a nurse. As I was reading about her, I learned that she also enjoyed activities like camping, tubing, and hanging out with her friends. And apparently, her dream was to one day travel the world. Now we're going to go back to July of 2010. Missy met a guy, and his name was Robert Prop. She met with him when she was at her sister's house celebrating her niece and nephew's birthday. Robert had just moved in next door, and he was living with his parents after recently going through a divorce. He was a father of 2 children already. There was quite a bit of an age gap, but Missy was instantly attracted to Robert, and it really seemed like they hit it off right away. Lucy wanted to join in if you heard her. Robert owned his own business, a car shop called Proper Auto. Robert was successful, and when their relationship started, he was really nice and really loving to Missy. Missy's family even really liked him when their relationship got started. It was 2 years before the two of them moved in together, and this is where their issues really began. Missy quickly learned that Robert was really just never at home. He was always staying late at his business and telling Missy he had a lot more stuff to do and he just had to stay late. And even though his shop was just a couple miles away from home, and Missy was really glad he had work because obviously that meant money, she was pretty sure he was doing other things there. She just really couldn't pin down exactly what it was. Of course, she's accusing him of things, he's denying it, and they just really start to have some issues in their relationship. But then Missy is absolutely delighted to find out that she is pregnant. Robert, on the other hand, was not described as being too happy about this. He already had 2 children, and they were older, and he was kind of past the baby stage in life. And at Christmas of 2013, Missy's family could really tell that there was a rift in this little family. Robert was apparently really quiet and distant from them and Missy. But this did not stop Missy from being excited about her baby. It was her first baby. She was really, really thrilled. And in January of 2014, she gave birth to their daughter, whose name I learned 2 different names, but I never like to release those things. Missy was described as an amazing mother, and she just lit up inside every time she talked about her daughter. So at this phase in her life, she is juggling nursing school, she's working, and she's taking care of their daughter full time. Now, I really couldn't find out exactly how it happened, but in 2015, Missy and Robert get engaged. Her sisters believe he was really starting to feel like she wouldn't really need him anymore. She was going to be nursing and making all this money, and he thought, well, if I propose to her, that means she's going to stay with me, right? So by Christmas of that year, they put on a happy face and they went to the family event. But Robert kept disappearing to his truck for long periods of time. And one of Missy's sister's boyfriends, fiancés, guy she was dating, goes outside to smoke a cigarette, and he sees Robert snorting lines of cocaine off the dashboard in his truck. Missy was extremely upset with this, and she tries to get him to go to rehab, she tries to get him to quit, and she uncovers the fact that he had been doing this for approximately 1 year before she was finally happy again. She was becoming her old self. She was just moving on. But after their split, Robert went a little stalker. He started becoming controlling, and he would just show up places. Her sisters related that whenever Missy went out with him, like for a drink or even shopping, he would just show up. In fact, her sister Stephanie recalls at least 10 occasions where Robert would drive past their favorite bar while they were there, and he would even flash his headlights at them as they were going inside to let Missy know he was there watching, which completely creeped me out. Stephanie also said Robert was worried, of course he was, that Missy was talking to other men, and she remembered a time that she and Missy went to a bachelorette party in Detroit. She said that Robert called her from the time that they left until the time that they got back, repeatedly, over and over and over, and Missy was just really upset because she just wanted to be left alone to have fun for one night, and he was upset because he had seen her before they left, and he thought that she dressed inappropriately for a bachelorette party. On July 5th, 2016, Missy and her sister Angela went for a drink. They were at a couple local bars, and Missy was hoping to run into a man that she had met previously and gone out with a couple times, but he ended up not showing up that night. So once they got to the second bar, Robert showed up, of course, and made himself comfortable by sitting down at the table with them, presumably to ward off any other men that might want to approach Missy. Missy and Angela decide, enough of this, we're going home. And Robert says, okay, well, I'll go with you. So he follows them home and apparently invites himself in to Angela's house. Angela said she went to bed soon after this, but she did hear noises coming from the bedroom that she believed Robert and Missy were sharing for the night. At one point, she did even get out of bed to investigate this, only to see Robert kind of standing there, sort of like holding onto the wall, which was a very weird description to me. I mean, you were with him, did he really drink that much? I don't know, seemed weird. But still, Angela really didn't think anything was wrong, and she went back to sleep. Robert and Missy apparently went back out to have more drinks. And the next morning, when Angela left for work, around 7 a.m., she noticed that Robert wasn't there any longer, but she didn't check on Missy because she assumed her sister had gone out drinking, and it was 7 a.m., so she was probably still sleeping. On July 6th, at around 10:15 a.m., there's a call to 911. It's Robert, and he says he had gone to the home of the mother of his daughter and found that she wasn't breathing. The dispatcher asked him if he could perform CPR, and he said, I think she's dead already. The Saginaw police arrive at Angela's house, where Missy is living, and they go upstairs, and they find Robert on top of Missy performing CPR. They decide to move her to the floor to continue performing CPR, but when they touch her, she was cold and stiff, and it was evident to the police that she had been dead for hours. Robert tells the police he had left Angela's house around 3 a.m. when Missy fell asleep. she's probably asleep. Robert says, this is the part I find weird, the doors were all locked, so he decides to use a crowbar to get in the house. And the police do see evidence of this at the front door, that it was forced open. At this point, the Michigan State Police are called in because Missy's death was ruled a homicide. And during this time, Missy's family shows up and they learn of the news. The body cam footage from the police was completely heartbreaking. It shows Missy's sister, Missy's best friend, and Missy's mom just losing it, which is exactly what I would be doing. They're screaming, they're crying, and Angela even collapses and has to be held up by their mom, Barbara. And it is completely heartbreaking to me, those sounds of grief. And I watched an interview where Barbara was talking about arriving there, and the house was covered in yellow tape, and she couldn't go inside to her daughter. She couldn't hold her daughter, and she couldn't tell her other daughters that everything was going to be all right. Robert is, of course, also seen on this body cam footage. He is outside talking to the police, and if you look at him, he has a black eye. He has cuts and scrapes on his arms, and later we realize that they're also on his stomach. And he is brought into the station for questioning. Before they could even ask him, Robert says that he got this black eye from a man at the bar. He said that he made some smart comment to this man, and the man punched him in the face. After getting a little bit more information, the police realized that the bar that the two had been in had surveillance cameras. So they get the CCTV footage from the bar, and in the footage, Missy and Robert can be seen getting out of Robert's car and walking into the bar. They had a couple drinks, and they left. There was no camera footage of a bar fight. There was no footage of Robert being punched in the face. Nothing. So at this point, the police are like, okay, we can't believe this guy. We have got to investigate further. And they can't hold him, though, because they have no evidence at this point. Well, they don't really have any evidence until Missy's autopsy comes back. Missy had been strangled to death. The medical examiner knew it immediately because he could see the marks on her neck, and her windpipe had been completely crushed. At this point, Robert is arrested and charged with murder. His first confession that he made on July 7th, he says he and Missy had sex that night in her bedroom, following which they had gotten into an argument, which included Missy hitting Robert in the eye with her elbow. This supposedly then led to them, struggling. They fell off the bed, and a dresser fell on top of them, which I thought was completely ridiculous, because don't you think it would have been in the police reports that the room, looked kind of in shambles? Maybe they would have thought, intruder or something, if a dresser had fallen over. What do I know, right? So, this, of course, is a change from Robert's initial story that he made on July 6th, where he had come in and found her unbreathing on her bed. He then detailed how this fall had knocked Missy unconscious. He explained that he just picked her up off the floor, put her on her bed, and covered her with a blanket, and then just walked out and left her unconscious, which really makes me want to smack him in the face even more. He then says, well, I came back more than 7 hours later, and it was then that he realized Missy was dead. No, dude, that's she did not like rough sexual activities. And it is completely horrifying to me that her entire social life was put on display. I would be completely horrified if that happened to me, and I know she wasn't around to hear it, but I always feel like that is just really, really defacing someone's memory, to put all their private business on blast once they're gone and not even here to defend themselves. The prosecution's theory was Robert killed Missy after coming home from the bar because he was jealous that she was moving on and he couldn't control her anymore. He became obsessed with her after she broke up with him, and he even stalked her, as we had proof of, with her sisters testifying that he had shown up more than 10 times in places that she was. I have to wonder if he was tracking her phone or something. How did he know where she was all the time? Now, because Robert had an open murder charge against him, the jury could decide whether they wanted to convict him of first or second degree murder. And after about 2 hours of deliberation, the jury's verdict of first degree murder was announced, which carries a mandatory sentencing of life in prison without parole. Therefore, today, Robert Propp is incarcerated in a Michigan state prison, where he will remain for the rest of his natural life. As for his daughter with Missy, I didn't find any information as to where her custody ended up, but I think it's safe to assume that someone in Missy's family is caring for her. Robert did decide that he was going to appeal this conviction in 2020, and it was denied, thank goodness. I really found this case really, really close to home for me. As many of you know, I have a crazy ex-boyfriend who stalked me, who showed up where I was, who called me all the time, who emailed me 300 times a day. I don't have any reasons as to why Missy would have let him into her bedroom that night. There wasn't a lot of conversation with the sister that she was there with that night, as far as, they were getting along fine, and Missy was like, whatever, just come in. Or I think it's really, really weird that he just showed up at the bar and sat down at the table with them, and they were like, no, we're going home, and he followed them and they let him in. That's completely crazy to me, but again, I wasn't there. I don't really know what happened. I do know that sometimes when you're in a long-term relationship like that, it's very hard to move past that person. And it wasn't that she broke up with him because she didn't love him or, didn't want to be with him. It was because he was involved in things that she couldn't condone and he couldn't give them up. So maybe she'd been drinking and she was lonely and she just decided to have that one night. Maybe it was some form of closure for her that unfortunately took a really drastic turn. I, for one, am right behind the prosecution's case that he killed her because he was jealous that she was talking to these other guys. She was moving on. She was happy with her life, He had already proposed to her because he thought she wouldn't need him in her life anymore. She was, finishing her nursing degree, getting a good job, and taking care of what needed to be taken care of without him. And he saw that, and I think maybe the cocaine probably didn't help with the irrational thinking maybe. I mean, I sleep with a fan, so a lot of times once I'm in bed and asleep, I don't hear anything. Sometimes Sean does wake me up when he's yelling, so maybe that could be the case, but I feel like if they had like a loud argument, like throwing things or knocking dressers over per se, the sister would have woken up and kind of, she seemed to me like the type of sister that would have jumped out of bed and busted in on this argument, like, okay, time for you to go, I'm gonna call the cops or whatever. So I feel like I don't really have an explanation for what happened, but I do think he murdered her because he didn't want to be without her, which sadly is the case for many of the cases that we cover here on my channel. I feel like 99.9% of the cases we cover here, it's like, oh, it's the boyfriend, we're done. Like, I said once that if anyone ever investigates my computer, they're gonna think I'm a crazy person because of all the things I research, and if anything ever happens to me, they're gonna blame Sean immediately. Like, poor guy. Anyway, I'm curious to know, did you hear about this case? What do you think? Do you think Robert just planned it all out and knew he could catch her and get her alone and she'd been kind of drinking? Or do you think that it was an accident, that they had gotten into a fight and he accidentally strangled her? Or the third option, I guess there's 4 options. The third option is he was not lying and she liked it a little rough and he accidentally killed her by completely crushing her windpipe. Completely crushing her windpipe. Or do you think they got in that disturbance and the dresser fell on her and his crazy self left her unconscious for 7 hours? Because I just have a hard time believing that that was the case. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you, I'll see you on Sunday here on the channel. I'll see you on Wednesday on Patreon for another true crime video. I'm gonna try to convince Sean to film a video for Wednesday so that you guys can have some extra content. Please leave a like and a comment down below, and I'll see you next week. Bye. Hey guys, I just finished filming this video and Sean has been in the room the whole time, and that's why I looked over at him a couple of times. He's playing video games, he's playing Pokemon, but after hearing me talk about this case, he chimes in and he says he was just a coked out POS, which I think I could agree with on some points. I always do try to give people like the benefit of the doubt, like maybe they just gotten into a fight. He's shaking his head.